Let me start with I suppose, a health warning for those of tender disposition, those who have unwittingly strayed onto the airwaves to listen to my show, or those who've been away for a while, perhaps in Broadmoor, who've never heard of me and don't know my point of view. This is radio with a point of view. If you want a different point of view, well, others are available. In fact, they're available 21 hours a day on a Friday and 24 hours a day every other day of the week on this very radio station. This is one show, one island, a lacune of a different point of view. Do you get my drift? So you can complain to whomsoever you like. This is my point of view, and on it I shall stand. The difference between me and some others, though, is that I positively welcome those with a different point of view, either to call or to text or to email or to tweet me at George Galloway at Talk Radio, or to come on the show as guests. Today we have sought the company of everyone from the Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs, the Right Honourable Boris Johnson, all the way to Lord Levy. The latter couldn't make it because it's Passover, and I wish him and all Jewish people the best on this auspicious occasion for them. We have got Sir Malcolm Rifkin, though, a former parliamentary colleague of mine, a very distinguished former minister, former Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs himself, former Secretary of State for Scotland, former Secretary of State for the Defence Department, used to be called the Minister for War. Now, Malcolm Rifkin and I don't see eye to eye. That's why he's on the show, and that's why you should stay tuned. But don't expect anything impartial from me. I'm not one of your Guardian editorial writers on the one hand, but on the other. If I feel sore, sound sore this evening, that's because I rather feel it. So let me give you my point of view, shooting from the hip, shooting from the lip. Some surprising news in the last couple of hours. First of all, a British Special Forces soldier has been killed by an IED explosion on the ground in Syria. Who knew the British Army was in Syria? Does Parliament know? Has Parliament voted for that to be so? Last time I looked, not at all. Sir Malcolm, as a former head of the Intelligence and Security Committee, will no doubt tell us why that British soldier was placed in harm's way in the alphabet soup of Islamist extremism that's at war with each other and with the Syrian state. An American Special Forces soldier was killed in the same explosion, and several other foreign soldiers were also injured in the explosion. I wonder if the public in those countries were aware that their soldiers were in the harm's way in the Syrian imbroglio. We'll be talking about that, but we will not be stopped from talking about what's happened in the last few hours in Palestine. 15 people, unarmed demonstrators, that is 2 more than that bloody Sunday in Derry, all these decades ago in the British-Irish War. 15 unarmed demonstrators have been shot down dead, and a staggering 1,500 unarmed demonstrators have been wounded. That's the Sharpeville massacre. That's the bloody Sunday massacre. That's many a massacre to the power of, I haven't quite worked out yet, but those of a mathematical disposition no doubt already are. Though you won't hear it on the mainstream media. You didn't even hear it in this very studio just a couple of minutes ago in the news headlines. It's not a headline, you see. 1,500 wounded Palestinians, 15 dead Palestinians. And we haven't heard a word from Theresa May. We haven't heard a word from Boris Johnson. And we haven't heard a word from Jeremy Corbyn. And that leads me to another subject we'll be discussing this evening. Jeremy Corbyn is under siege. The mass media in Britain has declared war on Jeremy Corbyn. They did before, and then after the frankly stunning reversal to their hopes in the general election of last year, they had to give him a honeymoon week or two, maybe month or two. But they're now in hot pursuit. First he was a Czechoslovak spy. Do you remember that? Do you remember the certainty with which the newspapers were telling us that Red Corbyn had, according to two newspapers in Britain, been accepting between £3,000 and £10,000 at 1980s prices for meetings with a Czechoslovak spy to give him information damaging to Great Britain, making Corbyn himself not just a Czech agent, but the lowest of the low, an agent of a foreign power who's betraying his own country for money. Then, when he asked a couple of half-decent questions which, if we had any proper journalism in this country, would be being asked all day and every day about the Skripal affair, suddenly he was not a Czechoslovak agent, he was a Russian agent. He was a Putin stooge. He was a Kremlin agent. Why, Newsnight even faked up a Russian hat and photoshopped him standing outside the walls of the Kremlin itself. It was actually a Greek fisherman's cap, but with a bit of higgledy-piggledy, it was a Russian hat. I suppose he should be grateful they didn't put the red star on the front of it. They didn't put a Lenin badge on his lapel. And now he's an anti-Semite. This man, Jeremy Corbyn, who has spent his entire life, and I've known him almost 40 years, fighting against racism of all kinds, fighting against anti-Semitism specifically at all times, has now been branded a man who hates Jews. And when they're not branding him as a man who hates Jews, they're branding him a man who won't do anything about those who do hate Jews. Now, partly, this is a deliberately conceived and directed from the Israeli embassy itself, as the Al Jazeera documentary The Lobby captured on film, where an Israeli agent from the Israeli embassy in London was captured on film plotting with British parliamentarians to bring down British ministers, including Boris Johnson's deputy at the time, the Right Honourable Alan Duncan, now a minister, I think, in another department. No, he may still be at the Foreign Office, for all I know. He's quiet these days, except when he described Julian Assange in the House the other day as a miserable little worm. How parliamentary standards have slipped since Sir Malcolm and I departed the House. But it's not only a political device. It's not only directed by the Israeli embassy in London. Anti-Semitism exists. It has existed in Britain for centuries. As you know, I'm a great advocate of the ragged-trousered philanthropist. In that book, written a century ago, the hero, Owen, a painter and decorator, is forever arguing with his fellow painters and decorators about the aliens that are coming into Britain with their different language, their different food, their different attitude to their womenfolk, the different culture from which they came. Owen never specifies it, but anyone who knows that it was Jewish immigrants fleeing pogrom and persecution all over Europe, coming to Britain for safe haven, to whom he referred. In the 1920s, 30s, and then again in the 50s, even into the 60s, overtly, explicitly anti-Semitic organisations existed in Britain, most of them on the fringes of the Conservative Party, not the Labour Party, the League of Empire Loyalists, and an alphabet soup of right-wing organisations who certainly never believed that Jews had any place here in Britain, that Jews were British like you and me. And I'll tell you, when Sir Malcolm Rifkin was the Secretary of State at the Foreign Office, and another man of Jewish origin, Leon Britton, was at the Home Office, a Conservative MP said to me, I could name him, but he's dead now, it probably serves no purpose. I've probably written it somewhere before. There's far too many Estonians in this cabinet for my liking, not enough Etonians. Anti-Semitism exists, and it's primarily a right-wing phenomenon. And up until a couple of weeks ago, I would have told you, probably have told you, that in 50 years in and around the Labour Party, I never, ever came across an anti-Semite. But now I have. In fact, in the last 48 hours, I have come across shocking examples of anti-Semitic posts, likes, retweets by not just members of the Labour Party, but people who were standing for Labour for council seats. One of them in Peterborough has become a big news story. People mocking the Holocaust, people casting doubt upon the Holocaust, people describing the Holocaust as a hoax rather than what it was, the greatest crime in human history. I don't know where this came from. I assume it emerges from the depths of animus felt by millions of people in this country and elsewhere too, at the behavior of the political state of Israel, which claims, a claim that's contested, not just by me, but by many Jews themselves, which claims to be the state of the Jews. But wherever it emerges from, it must be rooted out. It's a cancer. It must be dealt with vehemently by the Labour leadership. And we have the totally bizarre situation that John Landsman, the owner of Momentum, employs as his director a woman called Christine Shawcroft, who's had to resign some of her positions at the top of the Labour Party because she defended the council candidate to whom I've just been referring, the candidate in Peterborough that was retweeting, was showcasing, was spreading vile Holocaust denial propaganda. How about that, Mr. Landsman? How's that for anti-Semitism, Mr. Landsman? What you going to do about that, Mr. Landsman? And in the minute or so I have left before talking to Sir Malcolm, just so he knows where I'm coming from, the British government's official narrative on blaming Russia for the Skripal Salisbury poisoning affair is falling to pieces in front of our eyes. Every time a fact emerges which contradicts all the other contradictory evidence that has been dragged across like red herrings, this affair, it makes the official government narrative less and less credible. We are asked to believe that 2 weeks before his election, 100 days before the opening of the World Cup, and already sanctions hit Russia and its president, Putin, decided to waste a $100 million secret program of nerve agent development on an obscure individual in Salisbury who spent his days buying and scratching scratch cards. That's what Mr. Skripal's hobby was every day in a newsagent. Scratch cards. A man of no conceivable importance to justify causing a total crisis in Russia's relations with the world. If you believe that, you'll believe anything. If you believe that, I've got a bridge that I can sell you. So I hope, Sir Malcolm, you're sharpening up your arguments, because you're on next.